When was the last time you visited Chicago's free zoo? No, yeah, really. Lincoln Park Zoo is free. From outings with family and friends to a picture-perfect day spot, Lincoln Park Zoo is budget-friendly and great for all with many things to do. Even better, Lincoln Park Zoo has one of the largest zoo-based conservation and science programs in the country, and they run the nation's top zoo-based animal welfare science program. So, your visit makes an impact. This summer, visit the pride of Chicago, Lincoln Park Zoo. Go to lpzoo.org to plan your next visit to Chicago's free zoo. What's up, y'all? Have you heard about the latest hit from the Second City? It's called The Devil is in the Detours, and it's being hailed as gutsy by the Tribune and another crackerjack cast of talented, charismatic performers, clearly creative and a joy to watch by the Sun-Times. That was very visual and descriptive. This is the Second City's 112th main stage review, and it's a hilarious and unhinged descent into a dimension where chaos reigns. The show runs Tuesdays through Sundays at the Second City in Old Town. Grab your tickets now at secondcity.com and go on and join the fun. Today on CityCast Chicago, the Democratic National Convention starts today. So contributor Leigh Giangreco is here with everything you need to know about what to expect and how to get around. It's Monday, August 19th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Good morning, Leigh. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jacoby.
Always good to see you, my friend. You have been covering all things DNC this summer, which, oh my God, I feel for you. I feel for you. A lot of confusion, a lot of back and forth. Let's just start with the basics, Leigh. We'll have pics on our website and our newsletter, but can you describe for listeners the security perimeter and road closures around both the United Center and the McCormick Place where the majority of the convention is going to take place?
Yeah, so basically, if you go and look up these maps, which you can find on OEMC's website, what you're going to see are two areas. One is going to be in red and one is going to be in yellow. The red areas are the pedestrian restricted perimeter, and the yellow areas are your vehicle screening perimeter. So basically, what that means is the yellow areas, if you're a pedestrian, if you're a bicyclist, you can walk freely around those. They're not going to have fences around those areas, but there are going to be security checkpoints for vehicles, and there are going to be road closures there. Now, the red area, the pedestrian restricted perimeter, normal people like protesters or just kind of everyday people, that area is going to be fenced off. So the only people that can go into the pedestrian restricted perimeter are those that are supposed to be, at the United Center, same at McCormick Place. So your credentialed media, attendees, workers, volunteers, and you're going to have to go through, all the stuff that you would normally see at these kind of big security events. So there are going to be metal detectors, all sorts of things, like you're going to the airport.
We're going to talk a little bit about how transit is going to be impacted. And I appreciate you pointing out the Office of Emergency Management and Communication, where people can find these full maps. But say you're not attending the DNC, but you live next to the McCormick Place, you live next to the United Center. How should you expect your life, your commute, things to be impacted over those few days?
Yeah, you're going to want to be prepared with your ID. The city also has a city key program for people who live, for example, in the Henry Horner homes right near the United Center. I know some of the West Side residents who live in those areas have complained that they haven't been briefed properly on this, that there have been parking restrictions that have kind of come down at the last minute, and they are going to have to park in a different place for 10 days at a time. So, even though the Secret Service has said that they've been knocking door to door throughout, the late winter and spring, there have still been issues here in communicating with everyday Chicagoans that live and work in those areas about how it is going to affect them.
So when we start thinking about public transit, how our CTA, the buses and the train lines are going to be impacted, what do we know?
Yeah, so CTA is going to have updates on this. This is also listed on that same OEMC website, kind of the main buses that are going to be affected. So you have your number 1, Bronzeville Union Station, the number 3, King Drive, number 4, Cottage Grove, the number X4, Cottage Grove, number 20, Madison, number 21, Cermak, number 126, Jackson, and my personal favorite, the number 50, Damon, is going to be affected. I'm sorry, I'm such a Damon bus stan. I love it. I've been thinking about this bus route since the DNC started. I'm like, is my number 50 going to be affected? And yes, it is. And you can go to the CTA's website to see if more buses and more trains are going to be affected by the DNC. Crucially, Dorval Carter said in a public safety hearing in late July that on the rail side of the house, there's not a lot of extra service that we're doing, which to me was kind of surprising. You know, you have like thousands of people coming in for the DNC and you're not going to like run more trains. I understand that CTA has a shortage of workers.
I was going to say, I feel like that would, that would really smack Chicagoans in the face. If he was like, actually, we do have more people and more trains we could be running, but just for the DNC, we can't actually afford to be doing this. I feel like that's an interesting line to be walking.
Yeah, I get it that it's kind of a no-win situation, but you should know that if you do plan on taking the train that they said they're running regular service. So do with that what you will in terms of regular service for the CTA. But there's going to be a little extra capacity at peak hours, he said, or, you know, a little extra capacity for your baseball games. But they're not running a whole bunch more trains here during the convention.
You named off a number of bus lines that would be impacted. What is the range of impact? Is it simply a detour? Is it maybe a bus line will stop running during a given time, that there'll be more added? What should people expect across those lines?
Yeah, so if you look at the lines, they're going to tell you which ones are rerouted, which ones stop at a certain point. So if you think about it, it might be the same as like, you know, if you go to Wicker Park Fest or something and those buses get rerouted, you know, like that on steroids, right? Because it's a bigger footprint. You're basically either going to want to do extra planning and budget extra time if you do have to get somewhere and take public transportation, or if you are lucky enough to work remote, probably plan for that this week. That is something else that I've been hearing from restaurateurs. They're worried about how much business in the loop they're going to lose because a lot of the offices are saying just stay home. So I think there are a number of people that are just kind of foregoing all of these issues with the trains and bus lines just by working remotely for that time. But of course, if you work in a front-facing position, you don't have that option.
So we've talked a lot about people who need to park in the area, people who are traveling to and from, but there's a lot of other vehicle travel that goes through a given neighborhood during a week, right? How will those individuals be impacted?
During the Secret Service briefing that we had, we heard from Secret Service DNC coordinator Jeff Burnside, and he talked about how all of those different things like trash service and Uber and food deliveries are going to be affected during this time.
Bicycles are permitted in the vehicle screening area and are not required to go through a screening checkpoint. Ride shares, taxis, hot food delivery will be available in the vehicle screening perimeter. Those vehicles will need to go through one of our checkpoints, and so there may be some delays. Deliveries, trash service, mail, the all-important Amazon deliveries, they will continue as normal. Those vehicles will be screened prior to entering the vehicle screening area. And so there might be some shifting of normal delivery times. And again, we ask for businesses and residents' patience as we work through that process.
So expect delays at every level over the next few days. Back to school often means going back to the doctor's office, and there are many types of appointments that are essential to your child's well-being. And if you have a student that is starting, let's say, the second grade, like my niece, then they are most likely due for their first orthodontic visit. Now, often it can be very stressful trying to find the proper time, funds, and doctors for the various appointments. For orthodontia, orthodontic experts is where the best value, quality, and accessibility align. They provide exceptional orthodontic care with various options, including traditional metal, gold, ceramic, and lingual braces and clear aligners. They also accept most major insurances and even create personal payment plans. Furthermore, they provide evening and weekend availability that will easily fit into your busy back to school schedule. And the best part is that they are always located conveniently near you. So why wonder? Find out if orthodontic treatment is right for your child now with a no-cost consultation. So we just heard a voice there from the Secret Service. I mean, who are all of the different law enforcement agencies involved in the DNC?
Well, that's a big question that a lot of reporters have been asking, because what we've been told is that outside law enforcement agencies are coming in for this. We know that law enforcement agencies from Milwaukee are helping out here because CPD helped them during the RNC. So we know we can expect 500 police officers from across Illinois and Milwaukee as well. Any of those outside officers are supposed to go through 12 hours of training so that they are on the same page when it comes to the consent decree. The big question still is where a lot of these officers specifically are going to come from. The CPD has denied FOIA requests from the Chicago Tribune. They were seeking to find out, how many out-of-town officers were coming to the city and where exactly they were going to come from. And the reason why this is such a big issue is that during the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, there was a police officer from Ohio who fatally shot someone outside of the convention's security perimeter. So that's why, reporters are wondering, okay, you have all these outside officers coming here. Where are they coming from? What's their background? And that still seems to be up in the air. What we do know is that there are a number of federal law enforcement agencies that have also been coordinating for months on this. So the Secret Service has taken the lead in what's called a national special security event. It's basically when you have, thousands of people somewhere and a bunch of political VIPs. And what that triggers is the Secret Service and all these other agencies, including folks like FEMA, that have to get together and coordinate.
You talked about them having to go through 12 hours so they know they're up to speed on Chicago's consent decree, which is the federal mandated CPD reform efforts. I don't know. I hear that and it causes me a lot of concern. I wonder, what are you hearing from people in the lead up?
So I actually think the bigger concern that I hear, not just from organizers, but also experts like the Office of the Inspector General in Chicago, is with CPD itself. It's not just with these outside law enforcement agencies. So earlier in May, the OIG put out a report. It was a follow-up to their report on the 2020 protests, which, basically said that they're still concerned about how CPD is going to interact with protesters during the DNC. They still have concerns over things like body-worn cameras. During the 2020 protests, they had those, but a lot of times they didn't turn them on. So there's concerns about that. There's concerns about, how they might use pepper spray, which, they're not supposed to just use that willy-nilly. There are supposed to be a number of things that trigger that, including the superintendent himself has to give that directive. So, I will be keeping an eye on how CPD interacts with these protesters. You have a mayor who kind of comes out of the protest movement. So whether he will be at odds with CPD on this, or whether we are going to see kind of a Lightfoot repeat of 2020 will be interesting. Are we going to see those same kind of actions like lifting the bridges, or is it going to be a little bit more measured?
No, I love the point that you just made, because like myself and for many Chicagoans, like you said, the concern we already have with CPD is one thing. How are they likely to perform? How are they likely to act in line with their reform efforts or not act in line? And now when you add in numerous police personnel from outside of the city, it just makes me worry that now we've set up a situation where we can scapegoat. You know what I mean? Where it's, oh, no, those weren't CPD officers who overstepped, had misconduct. No, those were outside law enforcement. And so, you know what? Next time we'll try to make sure our protocol is better to prevent this. And so that's the biggest concern I have, is that we're going to end up in a situation where no one is willing to take accountable for any problems that take place. I recently read in the Tribe that as they were trying to break down and understand how federal funding was going to be spread across CPD, there were still questions about how that money was going to be used for surveillance technology, for other tools. Do we know more on exactly what kind of technology is going to be used at the DNC?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Corley over at the Tribe has done some great reporting on this. They FOIA'd budget documents over there. And basically it just said it was, 14.5 million earmarked for unspecified quote unquote equipment. And so it's kind of a vague definition of what they are spending on. I know from my previous reporting that CPD used $11 million in federal funds earmarked for the DNC on a helicopter that they have wanted for a while. But, it's very confusing. This is a piece of technology that CPD has been wanting for a really long time. Basically, what they've argued is that you have a lot of these carjackings and robberies that end up in high-speed chases. Those are dangerous for police. Those are dangerous for, bystanders, other vehicles. So what CPD is hoping is that they can use these helicopters to pursue those potential carjackers. When I interviewed Superintendent Snelling about this earlier this spring, he was adamant that CPD was not going to use the helicopters to, quote unquote, monitor First Amendment activities, such as protests at the DNC. And instead, they're going to be used for these vehicle pursuits. So it's kind of confusing. It's like the Chicago Police Department is supposed to use that federal funding for the DNC, but you have the superintendent saying it's going to be used for this kind of broader security issue or this broader crime fighting issue. So it's kind of this like little loophole that you can have here. And that kind of makes me wonder, okay, well, what other technology are they buying with those federal funds? And is it
sort of shoehorning into this time?
Yeah. Is it actually being used specifically for the DNC, or is it just kind of like, we've wanted this a while and this is a really great opportunity to latch on to this federal funding?
Mm-hmm. I mean, a big reason we're even thinking and talking about law enforcement is because, as we've hinted to, we already know there are going to be huge protests. Members of Chicago's Palestinian community saying they're planning the biggest protests possible. In fact, they've already seen some over the weekend. The route for the biggest planned demonstration, the March on the DNC coalition, had been under debate really up until the last minute. Where did we land on that?
Yeah, so as of this recording, the March on the DNC protesters are in court right now talking about two things: the length of the protest route and also basically the sound equipment and other equipment that they wanted there, like tents and porta potties, which the city said, hey, you can't have those because those could be possible security concerns.
So since we recorded this, the protesters reached an agreement with the city, allowing them to set up stages, sound systems, and portable toilets in Union Park. But Leigh explains how the debate over the protest route had gone on for months.
Yeah, and of course, this has been the argument basically from the beginning of not just March on DNC, but several other protesters who have filed permits over the last year or so now, is they want to be within sight and sound of the delegates. That is the whole idea, is that you are interrupting what is happening at the DNC, that you are basically coming face to face with people in power and telling them your concerns. It's not to be in a park that is a couple blocks away from the United Center, or as the city originally wanted, to put protesters basically close to the lake.
Yeah, I know that they have a plan to protest not only today, but also Thursday at noon. And in my understanding, the current route starts and stops at Union Park, which for all practical purposes is what, like a 10-minute walk from the United Center. Still not as close as organizers want it to be, but not nearly as far as, like, say, Grant Park. Are there any other big protests planned for this week?
Yeah, so we have a couple of protests going on. The Poor People's Army in Humboldt Park is happening August 19th. Now, their route actually goes from Humboldt Park basically to the United Center. The reason that they can get a little bit closer is that the city basically missed the deadline. And so somehow they were able to get their permit while all these other groups could not. Then we also have Chicago Coalition for Justice in Palestine. That's on August 21st. And then, of course, I think there's going to be a lot of protesters who haven't bothered to file permits. Again, as I mentioned, the whole point of a protest is to interrupt things. Remember, back in the spring, we had protesters who blocked O'Hare. They were protesting the U.S. government's support of Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza. And so I would not be surprised if something like that happens again. Again, it is likely that if protesters block a roadway, that they will be arrested. That is going to be something to watch as well. And another thing, as we were talking about before, is you're planning your day. If you have a trip, maybe take the Blue Line, budget extra time rather than driving to O'Hare, because I would put smart money on the fact that there are going to be protests there or some kind of delay happening, whether that is VIPs coming in or protesters.
So what have you heard about, or what have we heard from Larry Snelling, CPD Superintendent Larry Snelling, going into the DNC this week?
Yeah, so he's talked about this several times, that CPD is going to let people express their First Amendment rights.
The Chicago Police Department will not only allow everyone who comes here to express their First Amendment rights, but we will also protect their rights while they're doing it. We will protect them. What we will not tolerate is vandalism to our city. What we will not tolerate is violent activity. If we see that, we will put an end to it quickly.
Yeah, that violent activity category, bro, that's the one that often gets opened up and a lot of things start falling under that bucket, blocking traffic. I'm thinking back to surrounding Buckingham Fountain. And so I just, again, my big concern is what exactly is CPD and the other officials, other law enforcement agency, exactly what does it mean to see and to police, again, violent activity when you have so many different definitions, given the number of law enforcement you have in the city? What's the biggest thing you're watching for this week and in the weeks that follow?
Well, kind of a point on the violent activity and what police are going to do. I think another big question here is what are, not just law enforcement agencies going to do, but what are judges going to do? What is the Cook County State's Attorney's Office going to do? Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx has long said that, they are not going to prosecute peaceful protesters. And that was something that they talked about in the spring, as we saw all of these protests happening at campuses in and around Chicago. So it'll be interesting kind of moving forward to see how many folks get kind of, slapped on the wrist or maybe a little bit more by the city for protesting and what that looks like.
Before we let you go, Leigh, what are a couple of apps people should download if they want to get the latest alerts and the updates surrounding the DNC?
Yeah, so I actually already signed up for the Sun-Times group chat. It's actually really great. It's in this kind of conversational tone.
Yeah, shout out to Ellery Jones, who helps run the Sun-Times SMS program.
Yeah, they're doing a great job with this. It sort of feels like a better version of the political emails that are like, hey, Jacoby, I need your help. But it's like but it's fun and not terrible. So I would highly recommend those. Another one that you should sign up for, it talked again about the city's Office of Emergency Management and Communications, OEMC. They have a text that you can sign up for, and then they also have an app that you can download. Same with CTA. If you don't already have your Venture app, you should have that. And then you can also go to the CTA's website and look and see, what kind of updates they have on rail service and bus service and any interruptions.
If you have people who are visiting during this DNC week, also make sure you put them on our episode from last Thursday when we gave people a little visitor's guide, some of our favorite places to stop by, some places that might have less of a line compared to other restaurants this week, but also some of our biggest Chicago pet peeves, just some things to avoid doing if you're visiting this week. I want to give another huge shout out to our guest and contributor, Leigh Giangreco. Leigh, always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jacoby. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Before we let you go, make sure you bookmark our website, chicago.citycast.fm. There you're going to find our latest articles, neighborhood guides, and you can subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Now, of course, I can't let you go without some good news. There are some amazing events tonight happening across the city, far away from the DNC traffic, my friends. Tonight, you could pop by the Full Moon Jam at Foster Beach and Edgewater, stop by the She Safe, We Safe art installation opening night at Shine Bright Community Center in Chatham, or you can learn how to crochet or knit at the Austin Irving Branch Library in Portage Park. Take your pick. All the links are available in our show notes, and for more events, again, jump into our website, chicago.citycast.fm. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Peace.